Can everyone read this fine, or is that too small or anything?
Looks good.
Awesome, cool. So today we're just going to cover like the basics of Bash scripting or shell script. This really should be shell scripting since Bash is like a shell, and there's loads of different shells. But I guess we'll be doing Bash scripting basics today. They're all pretty much the same. Just know that you can have a whole different bunch of shells. Like there's Z shell is my favorite. Bash usually comes pre-installed on everyone's computers, Mac, Windows, Linux. They typically all come with Bash pre-installed. But anyways, shell scripts leverage the power of the command line to automate tasks. It's pretty much the way that you just talk to the computer, and you can really do anything with it. They're a fundamental tool for any Linux system administrator and extremely useful for developers as well. This is true. I use shell scripting almost every day. And it's just also basic commands of being a software engineer is knowing how to navigate through your terminal. Uh, it's common to write small shell scripts to do simple things and to write and use your shell scripts to configure and manage all sorts of programs on Linux. Learning some shell scripting will also improve your overall facility with the command line. That is true. Today's learning objectives, shebang. We're going to go over what that is. It's pretty much just like a little line on top of each of your shell scripts. Variable assignments. Are you guys all familiar with you all should be familiar with at least a little bit of programming languages, whether it be JavaScript, Python, or whatever. Is that correct? Or am I mistaken? Cool. Yeah, so everyone should kind of have an idea of what variable assignment is, the different data types within a command line, and conditionals, if-else statements, but how to do it in a shell script. Cool. Um, there is some challenges here. There's, I don't know, probably like eight or so. They're just short little challenges. They are meant to challenge you quite a bit. So not everything in the challenges are going to be a part of the lesson. But there are, it's, just go Google it. And there's just real simple things, but it's stuff that you'll probably never be expected to memorize. You'll find like little small things that is just useless to memorize. So you're just gonna have to Google it every time. But yeah, there are some stretch challenges down here later on if you're feeling up to the task. But yeah, also a good thing that no one told me when I was going through Platoon was to push literally everything up to Bitbucket or GitHub, I think is what we use. Yeah, GitHub. And this kind of keeps a track and you can kind of go back and, just have some version control to just review stuff and to show your progress. But yeah, pretty much. So when you're doing these challenges, feel free to you can even just do it manually and just create a repository or whatever and just add your files to it and just kind of keep a storage log of it. Cool. And if you guys have any questions or need help doing that, let me know. Or ask TA Stephen as well. Um, you guys know Stephen, right? You guys introduced yourselves already? All right, great, cool. I don't want to skip over that. Anyways, let's dive into the lesson. It's a pretty quick one. It shouldn't take too long. I know it seems like a lot of words, but it's really it's not too bad. Does someone want to volunteer to read this first part so I can drink some water?
I'll do it if nobody wants to. You want me to just read that whole first paragraph, correct? Or the
Yeah,
first batch scripting? All right.
whatever you want. Just go for it.
All right. So the standard shell that comes with Linux is called bash. It's also called born again shell. But the meaning behind that isn't significant at this point. Bash supports a number of commands and operators, as we have seen in the previous lectures. But sometimes you will want, oh, two wants, huh? Sometimes you'll want to repeat a set of actions more than once, and typing the same command over and over again gets old. This is where scripting comes into play, and Bash supports its own scripting language. Bash scripting supports all the Bash commands that you have seen before, plus many of the constructs that make a real programming language useful. Features like variables, conditions, loops, and functions. With that said, Bash has some quirks, and compared to more universal programming languages like Python, it has some archaic features and strange syntax rules that you just need to come to terms with. So it's pretty much saying you're going to have to accept some things and you don't have a choice. If a script becomes large enough, It's common to rewrite or port it into Python. Or for a script you know will be complex, use Python from the beginning. This is because Python is more powerful and flexible, and it's more portable, and most importantly, it's easier to debug. But for small or quick and dirty tasks, Bash scripts are a great tool.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think this hits on a very important topic. Bash scripts should only be used for very small or quick tasks. You don't really want a massive ass Bash script. It's just better to do that in a full programming language like Python or whatever programming language you prefer. Typically Python's pretty quick. Um, nice catch on the want want. I'll have to drop a PR later and fix that. Um, yeah, okay. So it looks like we're going to get into the Hello World Bash script. Um, Following the grand tradition of computer science educators everywhere, we will introduce Bash scripting with the basic script that prints Hello World to the console. Kind of like if you're familiar with Python, like a print Hello World, that's exactly what we're going to do, but in Bash. So I don't know. I'm not going to bore you with reading all this because I don't want to read it. But let's just go ahead and create a simple file. So we can just do a well, here, I won't go too advanced. So we'll just do a touch and hello.sh.
Can I ask a
Dot
quick
sh.
question?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I'm familiar with the idea of bash and the shell and all that stuff, but then you just said like if it gets too big, you go to Python. So
Mhm.
I'm just trying to understand what would be the function you'd be doing with bash? Like what's a small thing you're going to do, and then why would you go over to Python? Um,
Say you wanted the simple, like a simple script to like format your file naming systems. That would
mhm,
like you would create a function and you would like input like an argument for like I don't know the file name and say you want like the date time to be added onto that, then that's what
sure.
you shell script for. And just make it or like to and you could use shell script literally for anything. Um,
So you can use it just like you use Python. However, Python is just better syntax and easier to use. So if it gets too
well,
big or complicated, go to Python.
Python's very largely supported with external libraries. So there's a lot more modules that you can use from like other developers since it's very community friendly. So there's just a lot more external modules that you can use. There's a lot for shell scripting as well, but it's just different. It gets a little bit more confusing. But yeah, it is typically better to use a programming language if you have like a large task and break it out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Hopefully that answers your question. Anyways, feel free to follow me along, or not. Doesn't matter. It's just we're just gonna go over a couple small commands. So we're gonna use the touch and then type in the name of file I want to create. The .sh is the file extension for a basic, well, shell script. You'll see that very common. Yes, Jeremy.
Are you in terminal or are you in the command line or were we? I'm not a Mac, so
Yep. Yep. This is just the command line terminal. It's all the same thing. On Windows, I do have a Windows laptop right next to me. I believe it's called, what is it called? I don't even know.
because I also have Git Bash. I don't know if that's what we're supposed to be on.
Yeah, just you said you're on a Windows?
Correct.
Yeah, just hit your terminal or your little Windows button and just type in terminal and it'll actually
Okay.
hit
Yeah.
terminal. Yep. It's just
No.
the command line interface to talk to the computer itself.
Okay. So like PowerShell or
Yep, PowerShell is one. Yep, that's there's so many different shells out there. I think PowerShell is Windows default. And then there's Bash, there's Z shell. So if I do like an echo and then shell, it'll say right here what shell you're in. Or you just type in probably just shell or like which shell. But I'm in Z shell currently, but it doesn't really matter. Bash or Z shell or PowerShell, they'll all do the same thing. Cool.
I have a question. I have another question.
Yeah, what's up?
Uh, can we do all of this inside the VS Code terminal, or do I need the just the
Yeah,
external?
absolutely. I don't have. I'm on the. I'm not on my Platoon laptop right now. I'm actually on my Oracle one, and I don't have VS Code. But I can show you. So this is IntelliJ. It's a different terminal. But typically, if you just go up to like the top or whatever, and there'll be like a terminal window, and you'll be able to open up the terminal. Right, for me, it's like right down here. But yeah, there's always going to be a terminal available in your IDE. So I don't know, shorthand command might be like a command T or something like that, or command N.
I'm already in there. I'm just wondering what the best practice is to.
Oh, well, to be honest, it doesn't even matter. I tip it depends on what I'm doing. Like for something simple like this, I'm just gonna work in the terminal, and also it's just kind of like Unix week. So it's probably best to get familiar with like the commands. Instead of using your IDE to like create files or directories or move stuff around, it's probably best just to stick with your PowerShell or terminal or whatever shell you're using. To do all your commands. Just kind of get familiar with the terminal itself.
Oh
And
yeah,
can
I'm
I
just typing commands inside the terminal in VS Code. This is
And I think to answer your question, and let me know if I'm mistaken, but there's absolutely no difference if that's what you're asking, because that terminal in VS Code, it's accessing the same thing. So it's all
yeah.
essentially the same thing.
Acho
Yeah.
que tá falando mesmo.
Sorry, what was that, Reza?
I'm sorry. It was nothing. Sorry.
For sure. But yeah, there's no difference. A terminal like this is going to be the same thing as like a terminal in your IDE or VS Code. Um, cool. Any other questions? Cool. All right, let's go ahead and touch hello.sh, which will create a file. Touch creates a file, and then just name it hello.sh with the .sh extension code. And so I kind of skimmed over you guys' lesson yesterday, and it looks like you kind of went over like the VI command. VI will let you, it's kind of like it's under Vim, but it's just a command in Vim to be able to edit a file within your terminal or well when in your system at all. So anyways, so we'll just do VI. Oops. I don't know why hello one showed up, but hello.sh and we'll press I to go into insert mode. And we'll just do a basic echo and do hello world. Cool. And now to exit out of this, I need to do escape and then hit that takes me out of insert mode. And then I'll go colon and then W Q. So it writes it and then it saves it is the Q. So and I'll hit enter. Okay. And then we can just run a bash and hello.sh. Okay. And it will print out hello world. You can also there's like a shorthand way of just doing the /hello sh, but you need to provide it permissions. As you can see, like there's no permissions. So you guys can just do like I always call it chmod, but I think it's actually like short for like change mode or something like that. So anyways, so we'll just give permissions to that file for the root user. So we'll give it permissions, and now we should just be able to do the shorthand version to call the file. Let me just delete all that. I want to do hello.sh, and I'll do the exact same thing. So do we have any questions on that?
Is that 777 just a default for anything you want to be able to run with a bash command?
Uh,
Shortcut?
so there is a bunch of different level of permissions that you can. I don't have any of them memorized, to be honest. I just know 777 is probably like the general, probably like all permissions or whatever. But you can just Google it or like ChatGPT what the different permission levels are.
So the 777 is the most usual one anybody would use if you
Yeah, it's
create a
it's a
bash.
pretty common one. To be honest, I don't want to lie to you and tell you that I know everything. I Google a lot of stuff, so I don't know. It's just a number that popped up, so I just clicked on it and said, "Hey, let's see if it works," and it does. So, but I think it's a pretty general permission level.
Yeah, I think you're giving access to the user. You're pretty much giving, full access if you're doing 777. So that 777 is like read, write, execute, I believe.
Cool,
So they have the ability to do all three.
cool. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, you could always just Google it too. There's a whole bunch of different ones if you want to, I don't know, use different one or be more restrictive or more permissive, whatever you want. But yeah, what's up, Flo?
So usually when we work in a terminal and we decide to create a new file, we always have to do the change mode. There's no like default to just allow it for us to have total permissions.
Uh, so there is roles, and you can automatically assign different permissions to said role. But typically, if you're in the root user, I don't know, because there's always going to be stuff that you have to run like the sudo command with, which stands for like super user do. Um, and so I think there is. I'm just not exactly sure. But typically, you would have to allow permissions for a shell file upon creating it if you just want to do the shorthand way. But say if it has like I don't know, if you wanted to run it with bash, which is typically built in, then it already has permissions.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, there also is I might be skipping the lesson because I'm not really reading it. But if we just go back to like vi hello.sh, so that means we can write to our file and hit insert mode. You see how I don't have this is what's called the shebang. And it's at the top of your shell script. And so if I just scroll down and just grab it right here, you'll see this at the top of like every shell script. And what this does is pretty much just telling you like your execution path. So if you wanted to do a bash script, then you point to that. So if I actually point this to like, let's say like where my Python's installed, then it would throw an error because I'm trying to like, there's no echo hello world in Python, right? Like if it was a print, whatever, then it would be able to do it. And also like the naming file extension would have to be like .py. But anyways, so this is pretty common. Instead of bash, you could also do like sh or whatever. There's a whole bunch of them. But it's really not just know that it's typically on a shell script anyway. This only applies to like a shell script. Like you won't typically see this in like Python or JavaScript file. But yeah, it just tells you pretty much where your executable is. And it's just for shell scripting. But anyways, so that's Echo Hello World. So that's shebang. Let's see
Wait,
what.
wait, can you tell me why we need that? Like it worked without it. So what happens? Why do you need to have it in there?
Well, let's go ahead and read about it. Let's see if they actually tell us. In most programming languages, there exists the idea of a comment. Oh, no, that's comment. I don't want to. Oh, I'll go back to that. Where's shebang? I just saw it somewhere.
Oh,
If you scroll up, I saw it up there a bit more
Oh, there we
right
go.
there.
Um, no.
Yeah, it's just under
oh,
the
oh,
paragraph you
yeah,
read, I
it's
think.
under the Echo Hello World section.
Oh, so what
Yeah.
is a shebang? Shebang is like a comment that doesn't get executed in code, but is not quite a comment. It's a way of communicating with the bash itself about what kind of file it is. In particular, a shebang is generally seen as the first line of a script to inform bash itself what command you would like to use to run the script. It sounds a little complicated, but it's simple in practice. So yeah, I mean, I don't know the deep inner inner makings of it. I just know it typically just tells you what kind of file you are running versus like your file extension. So I do here. We could actually just show you a little thing. So this should air out. This is I don't know. This is not my file path, but I don't know. It's going to be incorrect either way. But if we should, yeah. So if we actually run that. We should get an error because it's not a Python file. Oh, well, I guess it did. I'm wrong. So, I guess it's just a comment to tell you what kind of file you're running. So I guess it's not the biggest thing, but it is commented out, so that kind of does make sense why it doesn't run. I guess,
And that,
yeah.
oh, sorry. That ch mod, is that like permanent or like every time you run it, you'd have to run that ch mod 777
Yeah, I
permission?
believe it'll stay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, like if I create another file, I'll have to like give that file permissions, but as long as I'm in this terminal session, it should stay. Yeah. Good question. But yeah, so I guess we haven't covered comments yet. You can pretty much have comments and say whatever. I don't know, see if we actually just like copy this, you would expect it to run twice, but since it has like this little hashtag marker, which is a comment, it won't run it. So we'll actually just run the file and see it just ran once. It's just a way for developers to leave notes or like explanations of why they did something. So pretty handy. You'll use comments quite often and come across them the further along in your career.
Is that probably why it still worked? Because you still had the shebang portion in there, and then you just added it to the end, the other portion. So maybe it commented that part out.
Well, I've always seen them
Or
uh with that. So it's typically like this. I think it just tells the user, whoever's writing in here, to that actually like what it's running, what kind of shell script.
right, but if you did it, I guess because I guess it was supposed to throw an error. If you did it without that there and exactly how it is in the lesson, then it should be an error, right?
I would think it would throw an error, but no, it didn't throw us an error. We can try it again though. Oh, there we go. So it did throw an error. Okay, so bad interpreter. Yep, no file. Well, that's actually no file or directory. So I guess it does do something, but exactly how much it does and exactly what it does, I can't really tell you. I just know it. I have an idea of what it does, but it's really not that important. Just know that typically shell scripts do have this um, shebang at the top that will point to where I don't know what kind of file it's being run. So if it is a file, well, if it's a Python script, I mean Python scripts don't even have shebangs at the top. So it's really just for shell scripting, I guess, in general. But I don't, yeah, it's really not the biggest, most important thing to know about. We could actually just leave it off, and it should run just fine too. Cool. Any other questions about shebangs or comments? Cool. You guys have the link to the curriculum, right? So you can follow along. I'll just post it here in the Zoom chat, just because. Cool. So let's go into variables. I think this is actually throw an error. Oh no, I fixed it earlier. That's what I did. Anyways, so let's go back and let's go back into our file hello.sh by the vi command, and we'll press I for insert mode, and let's just go on the next line. Actually, we could probably just delete it. So, little quick tip is that if you are not in insert mode and you hit double D, like D twice, it will delete the line. So just a little quick shorthand Vim for you. I'm not the biggest like Vim nerd out there. I actually quite suck at Vim. I wish I would have learned it when I was first starting off, because it is pretty useful. But yeah, I do know a couple little tricks. Anyways, so variable assignment. Typically, a global variable is all caps, and you assign it just like this. So my variable equals, in quotes, double quotes, world. And then echo, pretty much just like the print command in Python, will print out hello, and then this use variables, you activate it or assign it or just use it in general. It's just use this dollar sign right here. And so this should print out hello, my world. Cool. Let's give it a go. And colon and W2Q. And let's do it. Cool. And we got the same thing. And we run the cat command to just look at the script. So the cat will just print it off everything in the contents of the file to your terminal. And that's the cat command. Cool. Let's see what else they got on here. We're just going over some numbers. So let's just go ahead and copy this. Run the vi hello world. So we can edit it again. And instead of deleting that stuff, let's just keep it. And we don't need this. Cool. And so it's pretty much the same thing for numbers, just your variable assignment, and then your item, right? And then yeah, so you could also use quotation marks or not quotation marks, but parentheses to do any kind of operators, like minus, plus, divide, anything you think about multiplication inside that. But yeah, so this should run, and then we'll get play what 5 plus 10, so we should output 15. So let's check that and run the command. Hit hello world and 15. That worked just as expected. Okay, arrays. This gets a little bit more fun. Okay, so let's go ahead and add it to our shell script. And I for insert mode. And let's just go ahead and add all this goodness to the back. All right, cool. So what we're doing is we're assigning fruits, which is we're going to make this an array. And we're assigning it three things as strings. You don't have to have a comma in between them. They can just be spaced out and just individual single quotes. And then to add to the array, you just do a plus equals. So same thing as Python, right? Yeah, I think everyone here should be familiar with Python. Are you raising your hand, Mikhail?
Yeah, so Control V works in Vim to paste the whole thing.
To paste? I don't think it does in Vim. Actually, does it?
Oh,
Yeah.
how did you paste everything in there a while ago?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It does work in Vim, yeah.
That's what you use, right?
Yeah, Control V. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know some shells don't allow you to use that, but this one does. So yeah, good question. Yeah, if you guys have a question, don't like raise your hand or anything, just blurt it out. Because half the time I'm not looking at your guys' screens. Like I'm never looking at your guys' screen. I just happen to look over. So yeah, chances are I won't call on you. So yeah, so just please ask your questions. But anyway, so this plus equal sign, same as Python, we'll add it to this list. However, this is where the interesting part gets. The echo and then exclamation point fruits and then all this other crap, right? Looks a little funky. This is where shell scripting is kind of funky. So what this exclamation point does is it's asking for the index of everything in the list, right? So if we go ahead and print this off and just run the script, we should see a bunch of indexes, right? However, what happens if we don't want that? Well, let's go back in here and let's go change that. And we'll just get rid of the exclamation point. And now we should get every item in the list. So apple, banana, orange, watermelon. Cool. Cool. So let's go back to it. And so what is this array and at thing? So if you do this at thing, or the, I don't know, what do you call that? Like just the at? We'll go with that. So it's pretty much saying you want to list out every index of the array or every item in every index of the array. And that's it's pretty much the same thing as Python, right? Where you have the indexing with the square brackets here, and you put any kind of number in here and it'll display the element of the array. It's the same thing in shell scripting. However, the at symbol, which is kind of funky, right? You wouldn't see that in Python or any programming language that I'm aware of anyway. That pretty much means all the indexes you want them displayed out. So we could actually just prove that by taking away the at symbol. And I believe it should just print off like the first, oops, I for insert mode, escape, colon, WQ, and it should just print off, I think, the first element. Actually, no, I'm sorry. If you just do no list, then that's what it is. If you do no list, then it's the first element. If you take away the at symbol, then it's an invalid argument. So let's just go ahead and delete that, escape, colon, WQ, and we'll press it again. And you see, we just get the first item of the list instead of the entire list by itself. Does everyone understand that? Makes sense? I know it's kind of weird. It's very archaic, as I think it was saying earlier in the README.
The only question that I have is, if I remember correctly, you put the exclamation mark in the beginning, and then that just returned the indexes. I want to ask you why, but I'm sure that's like a crazy, you'll have a crazy answer to that. So I guess the question is, are there other use cases where the exclamation mark is used? And if so, is it also relevant to like indices or what are some other use cases? Are you familiar?
I believe it's just for the index as far as I'm concerned. I don't think I've used it for anything else. But yeah, it's always going to be in the front. You could also use exclamation point for like not. So if you do like, say if you have a Boolean, right, a true or false item, and you do like an exclamation point in front of the variable Boolean, then it equates to like the opposite of whatever it is. If that makes sense, I'm probably butchering that.
Yeah, because the exclamation mark, when I say it, I think of JavaScript, where you'll use it as a not.
Yeah, but the reason why it's pointing the index, I can't tell you. Shell scripting is so old and it's very archaic, and they just want to update it just because like backward compatibility. It would just make a nightmare, and everyone kind of already knows the basics of shell scripting anyways. But anyways, that's kind of what the not symbol or the exclamation point does at the front of an array.
A lot of it has to do with memory. I mean, Shell's been around forever, so back when memory was priceless, hence white space being special and stuff like that in the shell script. And then you just have technology built on top of technology built on top of technology that relies on it to be backwards compatible. So I mean, it's like you said, but I was just saying, like it goes back to when memory was precious.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense too. Yeah, it's this is like the first way of how everyone used to program. So yeah, no, it's pretty old. It's been around a while. And just changing things. But yeah, right on. Cool. So that's arrays. Very entry knowledge into arrays. Cool. Let's go over conditionals. This is gets a little bit more fun too. So let's just clear out this. We'll just keep it around. We'll just go VI and then our file. And let's go to insert mode and insert at the end. Name, I'm going to change this to, oops, I actually have to scroll up because I'm in a shell. Let's just change this to Reno Averill because that's my name. Cool. And then so if so this thing's specific for like if and case statements and stuff like that. So you do a double square bracket. And so if the variable at name, which would be Reno Averill, is equal to the user. Okay, so that's another thing. That's a good point to bring out about shell scripting is that there are global variables that are already come within your shell. So if I do like an echo shell, it'll take me or I'm sorry, an echo user, then that keyword or that variable is already stored as, or should be stored as Reno Averill, like whatever you see when you like log in, whatever user you're logging in as user. But there's a load of global variables that are already known to your terminal. Okay, so if your brackets and then your statement, whatever's in your statement is true, then you always have to have this semicolon and the then in shell scripting on the same line of your if statement. And then if this equates to true, then we want to do all this goodness. So we're just echoing your name is your username. Else, so if this equates to false, then you want to do whatever this is. Your name is something else. And this is actually needs an, that's a good miss right there. That needs an I. So phi is just it's the it's the opposite of if. So it pretty much just closes this if statement. If you think in JavaScript, you have like an opening bracket and a closing bracket. You can think of phi as like your closing bracket for if statements only. There's also like case statements, which I think we'll probably get into later. Yeah. But it's pretty much always going to be the backwards spelling of what you're doing. So in this case, if statement phi. Make sense?
Yep. I just have a quick question on for the user portion, is that built in already? Is that like a default variable there?
Yeah, I
Do you
mean,
have like
yeah, so you create a user when you create your laptop, or like when you buy a new laptop, you set up a user, and that's going to be like one of your users. That's yeah. So here we can actually just check it out. Let's just do an echo. Let's do an echo and then user. I actually think I need to put that in quotes. Actually, I shouldn't have to put it in quotes. Cool. So let's just see it. And we'll run it. Reno Averill. So before it wasn't echoing or printing or anything, but that is my user. And so your name is your username. Because I know that's when I created the laptop, I created the user, Reno Averill, that's my name. So that's but yeah, there's a bunch of whole like baked in stuff. So I could do like a echo shell. Shell is one of them, and it just points to whatever shell you like default shell profile. And yeah, there's just a whole bunch of them.
And they're all case sensitive, so they all have to be uppercase, right?
Yeah, so global variables typically they tend to be uppercase. You can create other variables with lowercase, and that's totally fine too. But global variables are all uppercase. That is correct. Um, yes. So typically, like I wouldn't have this as like an uppercase. I would have it as like a lowercase variable, since it's not like a global one. That's fine. It doesn't really matter right now. Does anyone have any questions on the if else statement in shell scripting or anything?
You have to have that FI after it, or it
Yes.
won't work.
I don't know if it'll actually won't work. I just know you should have an FI. Let's go test that right now. Yeah. Yeah. So you have to have a FI. Yep. It's the same thing with case, any kind of case statements. We'll get over case. That's like well, it's just like other case statements uh sh- in any kind of other language. Let's actually go ahead and bring that in. Let's see what happens here and go over it. Cool. So we're assigning a variable num to 1. So case num in 0, 1, and asterisk. The asterisk stands for like all. If like, well, it's like an else statement. If like any of these other numbers, like if 0 is not 1, or like say this wasn't a 1, say this is like 2, and like else it would do this. So this is like the default if everything else fails if you have an asterisk. So if num in 0, so this is obviously going to be false, right? If num is 1, then echo there is 1, right? And then else blah blah blah, and then exec, or the backward spelling of case, to close out your else statement. Okay, so we can go ahead and improve that logic by escaping colon WQ to write and save. And let's go ahead and write that. And there is a 1. Cool, right? Because it was the option. You could also just test it by just changing it. I don't know. Let's just do 5, right? And catch that else statement. That should work just fine. There is something else. Cool. Does anyone have any questions on case statements? It's pretty much like an if else statement.
Yes.
Yeah, go for it.
So, so with the if else statement that you showed before with the are you only, I guess like in Python you have if and then elif and then else, right? Is for the just if else, are we is I guess what I'm trying to ask is, are you able to put multiple arguments in the first one that you showed us?
Yes.
Or is that where the second one comes in with the case?
So they're pretty much doing the same thing. It's just two different ways of doing it. But yes, you could absolutely add more if statements. You can only have one else statement, but yes, you can have multiple if statements and a single else statement. You can also nest them, which just means like if this, then if that. You just create like a whole big nest if you want. But yes, they're pretty much doing the same thing. Typically, you won't see case being used. But you will see if else statements a lot more frequent within your coding.
Okay, and then just a follow-up on that, because you know how I guess in Python, if you did if and then if again, it will evaluate both if statements. But if
Mhm.
you have if, elif, it'll only evaluate one of those statements.
That's
If
that's
is
correct.
that would that be the case here? Like if we put another if statement in there and they were both evaluated to true, would we still get both values returned, or would it be, or would it work as in the first if statement it hits, then that's the only one it would evaluate?
Good question. Let's put it to the test right now. I don't know. What should we do it? Let's just say Reno Avril. Oops, actually it would have to be quotes. And let's see if that works. Let's run it. Nope. Okay, so you do have a syntax error when you do that. So it looks like you can only, no, I know you can have multiple if statements, so there's probably something else wrong with my code. If Reno Avril,
Would you have to use phi twice since you've opened it twice?
oh, you know what? That's exactly what's going on here. Phi only correlates to one if statement. So if you wanted to have like a multiple, like it would have to be nested. But yeah, good point and good catch. But yeah, you would have to have a phi statement there. So if you wanted the second if statement, then you would have to do the if. Um, you'd have to do the if and then the phi. That was a good catch. Thank you for that.
And let me ask, because I'm not really familiar with this, but if you did have it nested as you did, it would have still worked if you still have the phi in the correct place, right? Like as long as you close the one and close the other.
What do you mean?
So essentially how you had it, it was nested, correct?
No,
And
no,
then,
it wasn't nested. It was just an if and an if, so it threw a syntax.
oh, I see. I thought it was
Yeah,
supposed to
yeah.
be.
No, but if
Okay.
I did syntax it then I would have to put another phi statement within the nest, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So if I just had this, I don't know, nested in there, then I would have to have another phi and then, keep this phi for this if. Does that make sense? Like there has to be, you have to have a closing thing for your block. Well, yeah, same thing with case. You could also nest it. I don't really see the purpose of using case. I don't know if you like the syntax better, I suppose, but typically industry standard would be to use the if else statements. Cool. There is some detail in here if you want to go back and like read it. I'm just kind of skimming over it. But yeah, feel free to go ahead and look throughout the curriculum as well. Okay, so now we've learned a little bit about Bash. Let's have a little bit of fun. Let's exit insert mode. And let's actually just go ahead and delete all this stuff. I guess I could have just created like a new file, but we're already here, so let's do it. So insert mode and create. So let's run through this. This is kind of big. It's got some other stuff. So, well, it's not actually that big. It's actually a pretty relatively small file. But anyway, so we're creating a function. You could also, just like Python and all other programming languages and shell scripts, you can create functions as well. So we have two functions here. One, two, we're generating a log file and calculating a date file. Okay, so let's just run through this generate log file. We have a local date. So this, does anyone have a guess what this does? Where you have a $sign and then any kind of number?
Variable.
Sorry, what was that?
It's a variable, right?
Kind of. It's your argument. So if you pass in an argument, you can pass in like multiple arguments or whatever, but this would be the first argument. If you had a two, it would be the second argument.
Right.
Cool. Yeah, it could be a variable. Cool. So we're saying local date is the first variable. And then local is just like you're just setting like a local variable. Excuse me, get some water. All right. And then local log file, you're just setting looks like a path, or like setting like a name to a file. And then you're setting another one with doing a curl response, probably some API call to deduce whatever is in here. And then you're echoing, it's actually commented out, so it's not actually going to do anything. But it looks like it was echoing the API response. This looks like it's creating the log file. And then create a log file. It's just printing out to the console. And so this calculate date function. So right, if you just have these, they're not going to do anything. You actually have to invoke them. And so so down here, you're actually invoking these files. Like your target date is your calculate date. actually, let's not skip that far. My bad. So anyway, so we define these two functions here, right? Generate log file and calculate date. Now we are doing the command read, which will actually output to the terminal for a user response. And then we're saving it as this variable days prior. So it will read out to the console, enter the number of days prior to today's date. Whatever you enter will be saved to this variable. And then it makes this directory in your .logs. And then there is a for loop. I don't think we covered for loops, but it looks very similar to like old school JavaScript for loops, if you're familiar with JavaScript. So you have this for and then the double parentheses, and then I. So there's going to be three parts of the for loop. It's like very old school. And so this first one is how much excuse me, guys. So there's three parts, right? This is your incrementer. So like I plus plus or like I minus minus. So like how much you want to increment or decrement by. Your I is like how I is less than your variable or whatever. You can honestly just put like a number here or like the length of something. But anyways, this is how long you want it to run, and then this first one is where you want it to start at. So you're starting at the first index. You're running for as long as days prior and you're going up by one each time. Does anyone have a question on that so far? Cool. And then so there's always going to be a colon, or I'm sorry, a semicolon on the end of the for loop, same as like an if statement. And then you're going to do. So for as long as this condition is whatever, then you're going to do whatever these are. So you're setting your target date to your calculate date, and then you're passing it its first iteration. Okay, and it's going to do it however many iterations you have, however many days prior you have. So that's your input. And then it's going to invoke the target log file function that was declared up here or created up here. And it's going to pass it in its target date for its first argument that's being used right here. Okay, so I know it's kind of a lot. You kind of got to go through it a couple times, but it pretty much creates a file. Okay, so did I actually copy all the code? I think so. So escape colon Q, and let's just run the file. Cool. And it says how many days prior to the date? I don't know. Let's just do 2. And it creates all these files for me with the date on it, .log. So that's pretty much what an example of a simple excuse me, of a simple file generating kind of script. So this is exactly what you would use for shell scripting for something small like this, and it's not too overly complicated. I know it can look complicated at first, but the more you run through it, it'll kind of like click and make sense. Let's see. And so that actually looks like it's about it for the lesson. Do we have any final questions before I send you guys out to do assignments and take a break or whatever you guys want to do? Great. Cool. Let me just stop that. Stop recording.